In recent years, Ubisoft, one of the leading innovators in the video game industry, has experienced a series of missteps that have disappointed the company and its loyal fan base. While it continues to announce ambitious projects, Ubisoft is increasingly failing to deliver them with the expected quality or the necessary sensitivity. Skull and Bones and Star Wars Outlaws are examples of games that have further damaged Ubisoft's reputation. However, the latest scandal surrounding Assassin's Creed Shadows has reached a whole new level of controversy, specifically the reaction from Japanese players to the cultural misrepresentation in the game. It has thrown Ubisoft into a serious crisis. Assassin's Creed Shadows. A cultural misstep in feudal Japan, Assassin's Creed Shadows could have been one of Ubisoft's greatest successes. A game set in feudal Japan, a setting that fans have been asking for years. With a rich history, samurai, and ninjas, Japan offered an ideal backdrop for an Assassin's Creed game. But instead of seizing the opportunity to respectfully and authentically portray Japan's history and culture, Ubisoft made a controversial decision that sparked outrage in both Western and Japanese circles. The main character of the game, Yasuke, is based on a real historical figure, an African samurai who served under Oda Nobunaga in the 16th century. While Yasuke did indeed exist, his historical role was limited and mostly symbolic. Ubisoft, however, chose to depict Yasuke as a superhuman ninja assassin, which many players saw as culturally inappropriate. In Japan in particular, this portrayal was viewed as a distortion of history and a disregard for their culture. The reaction in Japan. Outrage over cultural disregard in Japan. Protecting the nation's history and culture is paramount. Historical accuracy is highly valued, and when foreign companies distort or exploit this history, it is met with strong resistance. Ubisoft seemingly underestimated how the Japanese gaming community would react to the portrayal of their country. The outrage in Japan was immense when the first details of Assassin's Creed Shadows came to light. Japanese players and historians were quick to point out the numerous historical and cultural inaccuracies in the game. Aside from the problematic depiction of Yasuke as a superhuman action hero, there were several other serious errors. Chinese architecture in Japanese cities, historically inaccurate banners and symbols, and inappropriate musical choices, such as the use of a hip-hop track. Particularly controversial was a statue of a female character from the game placed on a torii gate, a sacred symbol in Japan that is also linked to the atomic bombing of Nagasaki. The backlash was so severe that the issue was even discussed in the Japanese parliament. Ubisoft was forced to withdraw from the Tokyo Game Show, one of the most important events in the video game industry, and indefinitely delayed the game. The ideological conflict and lack of sensitivity. Much of the criticism aimed at Ubisoft stems from the fact that the company seems to make decisions that are heavily influenced by Western political trends and ideological agendas, rather than focusing on creative authenticity and cultural sensitivity. The choice of Yasuke as the protagonist in a game set mainly in Japan was evidently made to serve certain social discourses in the US. However, this decision ignored the cultural sensitivities of the Japanese audience and led to massive public outcry. This disconnect between the expectations of Western and Eastern gamers highlights how Ubisoft often fails to take cultural context into account, particularly in a country like Japan, where history and tradition are deeply rooted. A careful and respectful approach to the subject matter could have been the difference between success and failure. Ubisoft's general crisis. More than just one game. While Assassin's Creed Shadows is at the center of this current controversy, it is not the only example of Ubisoft's problems. The already released pirate game Skull and Bones is another symbol of the downfall of the once creative game studio. Originally announced in 2013, it suffered numerous delays and restructuring. After years of postponements, the game was finally released, but not to the success Ubisoft had hoped for. Instead, Skull and Bones was criticized as boring, incomplete, and full of technical issues, further reinforcing the impression that Ubisoft is no longer capable of developing high-quality games. Similarly, Star Wars Outlaws, another of the company's ambitious projects, also disappointed both fans and financially. The string of failures points to deeper structural problems within Ubisoft, affecting both its creative leadership and internal decision-making processes. The future of Ubisoft. A turning point. Ubisoft stands at a crucial crossroads today. The company urgently needs to rethink its internal culture and its approach to game development. Reports suggest that Ubisoft is dominated by a culture of toxic positivity, where criticism is suppressed and every idea is supported, regardless of its quality. This culture seems to be a key factor in why Ubisoft keeps releasing unfinished or poorly conceived games. In the case of Assassin's Creed Shadows, it is clear that disregarding cultural sensitivities can have devastating consequences. Ubisoft missed the chance to develop one of the most anticipated games in its history because it failed to meet the expectations of the Japanese audience. If the company does not make a fundamental course correction soon, it risks losing even more players and permanently damaging its reputation in the industry. Lessons from the crisis. Assassin's Creed Shadows is a prime example of how Ubisoft ignored cultural sensitivities and sparked a severe crisis as a result. The reaction in Japan shows that players are not only looking for entertaining games, but also for authentic and respectful representations of their culture. Ubisoft urgently needs to wake up and recognize that cultural sensitivities and authenticity are essential in the global market. If Ubisoft continues to focus on ideological agendas and neglect the creative and cultural needs of its players, the company will inevitably lose its place as one of the leading developers in the gaming industry. The scandal surrounding Assassin's Creed Shadows should serve as a wake-up call not only for Ubisoft, but for the entire industry about the importance of taking players and their cultural backgrounds seriously.